Okay, fifth graders, today we're doing our last new lesson before our Module 3 test. Tomorrow we'll do some review, and then on Friday we'll take our mid-Module 3 test, I should say. Okay, so today we're doing Module 3, Lesson 7, and we're actually not learning any new math concepts today. What we're doing is we're taking the math concepts we've known, or we've learned about and been working with and practicing, and today we're going to use it to help us solve two-step word problems. An example of one of these two-step word problems is your problem of the day, so let's take a look at it. It says, George weeded 1/5 of the garden, and Summer weeded some too. When they were finished, 2/3 of the garden still needed to be weeded. What fraction of the garden did Summer weed? So the first thing we have to figure out is what is this question asking us to find? So step one, write down what the question is asking. What is the question asking us to figure out, Allie? Yeah, we want to figure out how much Summer did. Okay? Does the problem tell us how much Summer did? Just says Summer did some too. But the problem does give us some important information that will help us figure that out. What important information are we given that will help us? Shobit. Okay, George did 1/5. Yeah, when they were done, there was 2/3 that still needed to be weeded. So right now, I want you to draw a tape diagram that shows this information. Go. Okay, so if we have the entire garden as our piece of tape, we can label that as one whole garden. Okay. We know that George weeded 1/5, so I'm going to split it into fifths. I'm going to show that George did 1/5. Okay. Now, Summer did some. We don't know how much Summer did, but we do know that when they were all done, 2/3 of the garden still needed to be weeded, right? So like this is the 2/3 that weren't done yet. Do you guys see that? Okay. I can label that 2/3 is what's left. So what that means is Summer must have done this part. So based on our tape diagram, we can see that if I add George plus 2/3 plus Summer, what would that equal? 1, right? Because if I add up the amount that George did, which is 1/5, and then I add to it the amount that Summer did, which we don't know how much Summer did, and then we add up what's left, which is 2/3, all of that is equal to the entire garden. Do you guys see that? So this is a great example of how if we draw a tape diagram, it helps us understand how we need to solve the problem. So now that we know that George's part plus Summer's part plus 2/3, what was left, will equal 1, how can I solve to find out how much Summer did? What do I need to do first? Maham?
You first need to convert 1/5 and 2/3 to have a common denominator.
You'll notice that we have different units. We have fifths and thirds. So we can use rectangular fraction models to rewrite it so that it has common units. So if that's 1, this is 1/5, right? And then 2/3 will look like this. Okay, let me shade those in. So here's 1/5, and here's 2/3. Okay, if I overlap them, oops, well, I guess we're overlapping using a highlighter pen. 2/3 becomes equivalent to 10/15, and 1/5 is equivalent to 3/15. So how could I rewrite this equation? Instead of 1/5, I could write that 3/15 plus Summer's portion plus 10/15 will equal 1. But instead of 1, I could think of it as 15/15. So George did 3/15 and Summer did some number of 15ths, and then there were still 10/15 in the end. How much did Summer do? How much did Summer do? Everyone?
2/15.
Good. Now 2/15 is just a number. It's missing a unit. So if I look back at the question, which I underlined, it said, what fraction of the garden did Summer weed? Then the answer is 2/15 of the garden. So again, we can always see what the units should be by looking at the question. Okay, and I'll give you a hint. Oftentimes, most of the time when we're working with fractions, the unit is going to start with the word of. 2/15, because a fraction has to be a fraction of something, right? So what is it of? Read the question. In this case, it's of the garden. So this was a two-step problem because we had to convert the units. And really, we combined two steps in our head. We added 3 15ths to 10 15ths to get 13 15ths. That was the first step. And then we did 15 15ths minus 13 15ths, which is 2 15ths. Okay, makes sense? Good. Once we draw a tape diagram, it becomes really easy to solve, right? We can see that clearly what we need to do first is find out how much money she spent altogether on her pen and her books. And we can do that by adding 1/3 plus 4/7. We know we'll have to convert the units to make them like units, but can we do that? Yeah. Then all we need to do is take whatever that sum is and subtract it from 1 in order to find out how much is left. Much like what we did on the first problem with Summer and George. Yes? Good. We're not going to solve that right now. We can see that first we had to add 1/3 to 4/7 to find out how much money Liang already spent. Using rectangular fraction models, I saw that 1/3 is equivalent to 7 21sts, and 4/7 is the same as 12 21sts. So if I rewrite this addition problem, I can write 7 over 21 plus 12 over 21 equals 19 over 21. Then I have to subtract that total, that sum, from 1. But instead of thinking of 1, I can think of it as 21 21s, right? Because that gives me the same units. So if I have 21 21s, or 1, and I take away the 19 21s that Liang has already spent, I end up with 2 21s. The only part that I still have to figure out is what the unit is. I know fractions are always a fraction of something, but how can I figure out what it is? Well, I just look back at the question. It's what fraction of his money. So it should say 22 over 21 of his money. Good. Okay, so make sure you label your answers correctly. We know that he has an entire can of paint, and the first thing he did was paint a bookshelf. Bookshelf. What fraction of his paint did he use to paint the bookshelf? It's very important to label it. Everyone? 3/8. Good. Then he made a wagon. Okay. How much did he use to make the wagon? 1/4. Good. Then he made a birdhouse. How much did he use to make the birdhouse? Don't know. Question mark. That's what we're trying to figure out. Then he had some left. How much was left?
1/8.
Okay. So now that we have this tape diagram, it becomes very clear what we need to do in order to find out. What's the first step of what we would need to do? Don't do it yet. Just describe it to me. What's the first step that we would need to do? Maham?
You would have to convert them into like.
Why are we converting, though?
So it'll be easier to add.
Ah, good. So we need to convert in order to add. But what we need to do, what we're trying to do, the main idea of what we're trying to do first, the first step, is to add, right? What do we need to add?
You need to add 3/8, 1 and 1/4.
Okay, we're going to add that first. We're also going to add 1/8 to it. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so we basically want to do 3/8 plus 1/4 plus 1/8. Okay, once we find the sum of these three amounts, that'll allow us to subtract it from 1, right, in order to find out how much is left for the birdhouse.